Gluten, Gleben, Glauten, Globen.
Dun, 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 dun.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cranked and Ranked. If you know, then you know. This is the second part of our Def Leppard album ranking. We should just jump right into it, because if you listen to the last one, we did 10 through 6, and now we're doing 5 through 1. And we discovered at the end of last episode that we could easily just draw a line in the mid-90s, and all of the lower half of our list was all from that era, and now we're jumping back. So now it's going to be everything, 92 backwards that we're going to be ranking. So this should be an interesting one, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about. So let's just jump right into it. With me, as usual, is Mr. Eddie Sparks. Hello, sir.
What's up?
What's up? And so as usual, we will kick it over to Mr. Sparks for his number 5 on today's Cranked and Ranked. Sir, take it away.
Okay, so my number 5 pick was On Through the Night.
All right.
Okay, so this is when they were still kind of finding their feet. They were still figuring out who they are. And this, to me, sounds like if Boston was a new wave of British heavy metal band. I kind of got those kind of vibes from certain parts of the music. And obviously, Rock Brigade is, this classic, catchy, new wave of British heavy metal style song. Awesome riff, great hook and feel. It's pretty much just a early 80s metal song, really, in context of the time. Then you get Hello America, again, those catchy hooks with, new wave of British heavy metal instrumentation and songwriting. This, to me, could have easily been a Saxon song. But that arpeggiated synth in the chorus adds a little bit of extra 80s glitz and glamour that Def Leppard would be known for as the decade progressed. Then you get Sorrow as a Woman. Yeah, much more chill. Shows off their more melodic sensibilities. I actually got kind of Eagles vibes off of that song at points. I'm making a lot of comparisons here to like 70s bands. And they were big into, the stuff from the 70s. So
well, it makes sense, because it really, overall, this does sound like an album from a band that hasn't quite yet figured out their sound. And so they're kind of influenced by everything going on around them. And so, you do hear those little bits here and there.
Definitely. I pick up on a lot of different influences throughout this thing. It Could Be You, brings the energy right back up. That driving... Yeah, it's just this driving hard rock track. It's fucking awesome. Love this song. Satellite, fun 80s rock song. Not my favorite. Still good, though. Then you get When the Walls Came Tumbling Down, which is this big... epic track, with an oh-so-British accent-laden intro, just like the one on Shout at the Devil. British accent intros, always, they're the pride of my nation. But yeah, it's so strange to think that this is the same band that would write Pour Some Sugar on Me, a few years later. And then we come to my favorite track on the whole album, Wasted. This is one of my favorite Def Leppard songs. That riff is killer. This is probably the closest thing they ever got to a straight up metal song, because everything in that riff to me screams 80s metal. This song in particular, it's just so intense and so powerful. It's just got that, I feel like that's where it crossed over from rock that they were doing into the metal realm.
Yeah, to me, it's a very un-Def Leppard sounding song. It's a good
Yeah.
song, but I remember that after because I got into Def Leppard around Pyromania and Hysteria, and it was a few years later that I went back and listened to this, and I remember somebody had it on a cassette tape, and we played. It just so happened that it was wound to side B. And so we started with Wasted, and I just remember thinking, this does not even sound like the same band or singer or anything. It's an interesting song.
Yeah, it's just one of those that really jumps out to me. I think, have you heard the Ellefson cover of it? David Ellefson's recently put together like a band, and they've done kind of like a covers album.
No, I didn't hear it.
It is made for that metal sound. But yeah, it's just such a good song. I really like that one. And then you get Rocks Off, which I put fuck yeah, fake live intros rule, and that riff friggin' bangs. The bass is also really audible in the mix too, which is nice. Because I feel like a lot of 80s metal bands tend to like just kind of copy what the bass would copy the guitar kind of thing. But then you get moments like this which really show it off. Then you get It Don't Matter, reminds me of early 80s Judas Priest. Answer to the Master, riff, groove, nice is all I've put here.
That's an important thing that you keep saying. You keep using the word riff, and I think a lot of people seem to forget that with all throughout the 80s, I would say all of their 80s albums, there were always heavy riffs. Like some of the riffs were so good that if you take them out of context of a Def Leppard song and just play them on guitar, they're so fun to play. They're so heavy sounding. Yeah. And I do really think that a lot of that is attributed to Steve Clark and Pete Willis. Because I just feel like all of the albums that those two guys were the, kind of the writers on for the riffs, though that's where the heavier shit comes in. Like, I mean, I like Phil Collin, he's great and all, and I like what he brought to the band, but I feel like, early on the first few albums, those dudes were kicking out some killer riffs on every album.
When did Pete Willis leave, or was he fired?
He was fired. I think he had drug and alcohol issues, but he wrote and recorded most of Pyromania. Right. But then by the time Pyromania came out, Phil Collin was in the band.
I see.
And there is even some killer riffs on Hysteria, which leads me to believe that Steve Clark probably was a big part of that. But yeah, so you have 3 full albums with Pete Willis really, having an influence on their songwriting.
Yeah, you can kind of tell because there's a certain aggressive bite to these first 3 that is kind of gone by the time Hysteria comes out.
Yeah.
But I just had one more track here, Overture. I got a big. This is where the Boston kind of thing came into it for me. I actually wrote in my notes here for the intro. More Than a Feeling much? This whole album has some Boston influence running through it. Really cool. And it's almost Iron Maiden-esque at points, which would point to their new wave of British heavy metal placing at the time. Yeah. But that's my take on Through the Night, my number 5 pick.
Awesome. And as usual, I'm going to jump right off of you with my number 5, which is also on Through the Night.
Hey.
So let's just continue this conversation. So this was their debut, if you don't count the Def Leppard EP that came out the year before, but this was their debut full length.
Yeah.
And really, like, to me, this is a really fun album. I don't think it's not one of those ones that you can really dig in and pick apart little nuances like you could later on in their music.
Yeah.
But this one is like, it's just like a great debut from a talented and like hungry young rock band. And you can kind of hear the excitement that they're feeling playing this music. Like they're just having a blast playing rock and roll. And so the idea of where do we go from here? I don't think they were even thinking that. I think they were just like, shit, we got a record deal. We're making an album. Let's fucking do it. And it's almost like it's not overthought. Which you could easily say later on down the line, they overthought a lot of shit. But this is the one album where I think for sure you can't say that. And it just has like the little bit of hint of what's to come. Like if you're a really big Def Leppard fan, you can pick out the little elements that would carry on with other Def Leppard. But for the most part, this does sort of fit in. It's weird that they do get, at the time, I guess, they were lumped in with the Nwabum bands, but they really were already on the outskirts because they were way more poppy. They had way more pop hooks in their songs than anyone else. And I don't know. To me, that this is it's such a fun album. And if we get there to our top 5 of 1980, this might very well be in my top 5 of 1980 because it's just one of those ones that you put the thing on and you just have a great time. And it's just a weird album because you're going through all of the songs and I'm like, I like Rock Brigade and Wasted's cool, but like to me there's no real standout tracks. It's maybe standout moments, but the vibe, the whole vibe of the album is kind of infectious. It just you can't have a bad time listening to this album. And a really interesting thing too is that a couple of the songs have almost like bluesy elements to them that it almost seems like they kind of abandon that very quickly. And if they do have any sort of bluesy elements, it's very layered deep in the rock. Whereas here they let it show through a little bit more. But yeah. Oh, and one of the most interesting things to me is that every time I think of this album, I immediately go On Through the Night, and that song is not on this album.
No, it's not.
The song on Through the Night is not on the album On Through the Night. We'll get to that eventually. But yeah, overall, like I said before, this is a band still finding their sound, but it's a hell of a debut. So I mean, really at this point, we're just talking about amazing records to me. So this is this is the 5th most amazing record they made. So we can move on to number 4.
Cool. So for my number 4, now this might be where we start to differ. I don't know. I've gone for High and Dry as my number 4.
All right.
Like you said previously, it's a very straight ahead. I think in the last episode, you mentioned how it was such a straight-ahead rocker of an album. Or you might have just said that to me outside of the podcast, so I know you said it. And
I'm sure I did. It does straight-ahead rock quite a bit.
Yeah, like unlike the previous album, this one's pretty much like consistent with what it knows it wants to be at this point. It's. Would I be correct in saying this is probably their heaviest album? Like,
yeah. I would because there are some pretty heavy riffs on this album. Yeah. So I would say yeah.
Yeah, and it's like I feel like I don't want to say it's the least polished, but I feel like it's got the least synth of any Def Leppard or like that kind of extra production work on it. It's very I was going to say because I was going to say that this that Mutt Lange produced this, but it still has a very sort of rock and roll. It's not as produced, I guess, as later stuff. But I almost feel like that's a turning point in the career of Mutt Lange because prior to this, he did 3 AC/DC albums, and all of those are just straightforward rockers. Or maybe for those about to rock, I think came out the same year, 81. I think, I don't know. But yeah, so I guess you're also hearing Mutt Lange
in his early stages before he got crazy about using technology and milking everything for everything you could get. Because this album feels like it has a lot more room to breathe,
Yeah.
like sonically, I guess.
And it's funny you should mention that he worked with AC/DC, because a lot of this album sounds like it could easily be on an AC/DC album.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the riffs on here are very within that kind of vibe. And right off the bat, you've got Let It Go, which is this fucking awesome album opener.
Hell yeah.
And to me, it sounds like an even better version of AC/DC. You know, that kind of, just that it just, with the vocals shouting along with it. Let it go. Let it rock.
And it's almost and it's kind of the beginning of the layered harmony vocals. It's kind of on a smaller scale, but you start hearing that on this album. Plus the midsection of Let It Go is so good. That entire riff with the it's literally just they're that's what I'm talking about with those guys. They would write those guitar parts that's just like, this is better than the fucking vocals of this song.
They're very singable guitar parts.
Yeah.
And that, I think, lends itself excellently to their sound. Then you get another Hit and Run, which is this awesome, it's just this 1-2 punch of two awesome songs right next to each other. Then you get, High and Dry, Saturday Night. It's great 80s rock vibe to it. Party rocker for sure.
That literally is a song that you put on if you're about to go out on a Saturday night, and you will be fucking ready by the time the song's over.
Totally. It is that. It's just this like vibe check for a second. It's like, you're down to party, right? You're 3 tracks in. Make your mind up, And then, guess what? Guess what's at track 4? The ballad. Which is
what a fucking ballad it is, man.
Yeah, like it's their first. Would I be correct in saying it's their first ballad? Like,
yeah. I mean, I guess there are slower parts on Through the Night, but I think there's not a defined ballad until now.
Yeah.
But this, man, they nailed it right out of the gate. This is probably my favorite Def Leppard ballad. We're talking about Bringing On the Heartbreak.
It's a damn good song.
Yeah, it is perfect. It is so well written and performed. It never gets old. This song never gets old to me.
Gypsy, sitting looking pretty. So fucking good.
You guys got that for free.
Yeah. But the free trial is up. You got to pay for the rest of the record. Speaking of which, I'm going to set up a Patreon. not yet, but that's later down the line. I'll set something up eventually. But then you get this instrumental track, which is Switch 625, and it's just this awesome heavy riff, and like it's really chuggy for like the era it came out. It's like just a jun those in there. It just so absolutely rips.
To me, that's always been the ending of Bringing On the Heartbreak, because I don't know how it is over there, but on American rock radio, on your sort of classic rock stations, they play those two together.
Really?
Like it'll be Bringing On the Heartbreak into that, and it's always felt like, you don't stop it there, you let it go into that instrumental because it's just so good.
Yeah. And, I wholeheartedly support that, because this song is fucking awesome. Mm-hmm. And, I actually forgot how good this album is, because, like, people always talk about, Hysteria, or if you're a little too cool for school, Pyromania, but this fucking album rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we say, this is the upper half of our rankings, so, it's fantastic.
Yep.
And I would say, at this point in the album, though, we do get to a couple of tracks that didn't quite float my boat as much. You got Me Running. It was very AC/DC in its intro. In fact, all round very AC/DC song. It's not quite as hard rocking as some of the previous tracks. It's not bad, but it doesn't quite jump out as hard to me. And then
Yeah, I think also the chorus isn't quite as rewarding as other choruses that they write.
yeah, and then obviously it's followed up with Lady Strange, which it's got some Iron Maiden style harmonies in there, but and it's a little bit more up my alley. It feels similar to the previous track in some ways, perhaps just a better version, but these two tracks mark a bit of an energy dip for me in this album. But once you get to the previous album's would-be title track,
Yeah.
on Through the Night, now this is more like it. After a couple weaker tracks, they give us this bad boy. They liked this title so much that they used it twice. First for their debut album, and now for this awesome song. And that's actually true. They liked it so much they didn't want to just use it once, so they put the song on a separate album. Which,
I mean, I'm glad they did.
yeah, certainly spices up the experience of this one, because you're like, hang on a minute, wait, which album am I listening to? Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and then you get the last two songs, Mirror, Mirror, Look Into My Eyes. Like
That's a great one. That's a great one.
This album is just chock full of really great riffs, which just take an AC/DC-esque tone and give it more of a mysterious, borderline heavy metal edge. It's a really cool song. And then finally you get No No No, which is this wild rock and roll closing track, one of the best on the record. That riff is excellent, and Joe Elliott is just nuts on this. He's just going for it. And in the vinyl version, I believe, at the end, when it goes, no, 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 apparently it's a locked groove. I don't have a pressing of it, but he just keeps saying no until you stop playing it.
Yeah, I don't have that one on vinyl. I actually looked for and got a slightly later version of it from the 80s that also has Me and My Wine and the Bringing on the Heartbreak remix.
Yeah.
So I think that one was like 84 when that one came out or something like that. But yeah, the original one, which I hope to get my hands on one day, has that locked groove, which I don't know why I love that shit. Just messing around with the medium of vinyl is just something that doesn't get done enough, and it should, because I don't know why it's so fascinating to me. I have a Monty Python vinyl where depending on where you put the needle down, it plays an entirely different side.
No way.
Like they have one side that just plays one thing, but then the second one is two slightly shorter sides that are in two different grooves in the record. And so you have to know where to put it in order for it to play the two different things. So it's almost like if you didn't know they did that, you'd be listening to it again and be like, I don't remember any of this shit. I love it when bands do that. Yeah. Monty Python were fucking genius. So yeah, there you go.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's actually really cool. That's kind of blown my mind.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Awesome. So that was my number 4, High and Dry.
Nice. And I'm not going to continue with you there, sir. I'm gonna take a little bit of a turn, and my number 4 is Adrenalize from 1992. Once again, we're talking about amazing albums here. The thing that I like so much about this album is the fact that it came out post Nirvana and is still poppy Def Leppard to the max. Like I realize that the majority of this or all of it was already done before Nirvana blew up. So I'm guessing they didn't want to turn coat and go back and redo everything. But, for some reason, just that part alone is enjoyable to me. And this is also the first album they did after a long time that didn't obviously have Steve Clark because he died, although there's songwriting from him on this album. Yeah. And Mutt Lange was not around to produce this thing. And somehow they still managed to get this really big rock sound from Mike Shipley. Mike Shipley was the producer, which I do think that Mike Shipley may have worked as an engineer on those earlier Mutt Lange albums. So I think maybe he had kind of an idea where to put all the switches and settings to give it the Mutt Lang isms. But it's the one thing that I do remember, though, as much as I, nowadays like the fact that they stuck to their guns in the early 90s, I remember, because I was a huge fan of the band by this point. Like, everyone, if you were around at that point, you probably loved Hysteria, and I loved it. And finally, they were going to premiere a new music video from a new song for Def Leppard, and the song was "Let's Get Rocked."
Yeah.
And at the time, I was like, "This is really dumb." Like it was like I was hoping for something big and cool, and it's not. It's very dorky, and at the time, I could see why a lot of people thought it kind of sucked. Because it was in between all of this other kind of serious alternative rock that was bubbling up, and then a lot of the 80s bands that were trying to shed their images and write more serious stuff. And here's Def Leppard,
sticking to their guns.
Suppose a rock's out of the question. It's like... So...
Not to mention the video.
Yeah, the video, which was like nowadays, it's all. I think it was supposed to be groundbreaking and it's computer animation, but now it just looks fucking hilarious.
It's like a scrapped Pixar movie that was put in a blender.
Yeah. But the thing about this album is that they did focus so much on the pop hooks, like Hysteria was already a very poppy album, but this one took that and ran with it. Like this is almost just a pop rock album. Like you can't make any connection. Well, it would be very thin connection to the new wave of British heavy metal. Like it's far removed from that. The big reason, as much as I enjoy this album, there's a lot of great tracks on here. One of the things that keeps it lower down on the list for me is the fact that I feel like there's not as much to discover within the songs. So, High and Dry, Pyromania, Hysteria, those are all albums that you listen to it, and depending on what you're paying attention to, sometimes you will hear different things and different elements, and something that you didn't pay attention to because you were paying attention to Joe Elliott, you miss on guitar. It was a lot of things where you could listen to those albums over and over again and get something new out of them. I don't think Adrenalize really has much of that. It's very sort of what you see is what you get, and it's good. But really, it's in the trajectory of Def Leppard, you had 3 gigantic steps up by Def Leppard. And then this one is a mini kind of step down, still not going low. It's still better than pretty much anything their contemporaries put out around that time. But it does feel like the climb is over. Like we're not going to get this next big Def Leppard thing. And we didn't. This is one of those things where at the time, as a fan, it was a bit of a letdown. But I do have to say, as a person who's continued to be a Def Leppard fan, this album has aged very well.
Yeah.
Like I'll put it on now, and it is thoroughly enjoyable. And I mean, there's amazing songs on here, and then honestly, some of the ones that I love the most are the most poppy. Like the ballads on this thing, like Stand Up, Kick, Love and Emotion is so well written, but it is. You could easily say that's not a rock song at all, and I'd be like, well, yeah, I guess not. And then Have You Ever Needed Someone So Bad? That could have been like a country ballad, probably, but it's.
Have you ever needed someone so bad?
You know what I'm saying? You could totally do it. So the one thing that I said at the beginning that I like about this album is I don't know if it was intentional. I don't know if they intentionally said, fuck this new trend, we're going to be Def Leppard. But I like to think that that's what this album was. It was them. Because what was this released? March of 1992. So by March of 1992, Nirvana was one of the biggest bands in the world.
Yeah.
By that point. And I just feel like this thing came out and they were just like, fuck it. Why is everybody going with this trend? we're already a band that established our sound that nobody else has. So the fact that they stuck to their guns, it just makes this album that much more meaningful to me, because I'm like, fuck yeah that they did that, and now we get to enjoy this thing years and years later. They stayed their path. They just said, fuck it, we're Def Leppard. Here's a Def Leppard album. And honestly, like it ended up, it was number one on the Billboard charts here. So it did well for them. I think it was a little bit down the line. People started to hate on it, but I don't think it's warranted. I think it's a good record.
I feel as though I kind of want to say they played it safe, but it's like they didn't at the same time, because they stuck to their guns in an era where the music they were making couldn't have been dumber, to the public consciousness. So,
and they released a dumb first song. You know what I'm saying? So it's almost like it was a middle finger to grunge. Like whatever. You guys are so funny. We're Def Leppard. We can buy and sell you. So
it's like, you can't kill us, man. Our drummer's only got one fucking arm and we're still together. So it's like it was a most triumphant album.
Yes.
But
so yeah, that's all I got to say about that one. It's one of those things where over the years I do think that it's gotten better in my ears. Like I'll hear songs from it and go, that's so fucking good. And I guess the only thing is that the fact that it has to live in the shadows of those three previous albums is the only thing that sort of holds it down. But I mean, for a band, it's all like, if you make albums that are so amazing that another amazing album doesn't sound that great, then you're a pretty great band. So there you go. Number 4, Adrenalize.
Awesome. Well, you're going to be pleased to know that the flow is back, because my number 3 is Adrenalize.
Sweet.
Nice. Okay, so track number 1, obviously, Let's Get Rocked. Stone Cold classic. Absolutely excellent. It's hilariously dated in its video, but that's what makes it endearing. It really is, like you say, it's like a middle finger to all the serious stuff that was happening at the time, which I'm not opposed to, but I can understand and respect a decision like this to kind of stay true to what they wanted to do. They wanted to make a Def Leppard album in an era.
I also feel like this song is a great, if you put it on a jukebox in a bar, it's a great one to gauge who the cool people are in the room, because I'm using the term cool, not cool, the people that I want to hang out with. I look around the room, and as soon as you hear, "Do you want to get rocked?" If people go, "Oh yeah," then I'm like, "Fuck yeah, you're my friend." Or if they're the people that go, "Who put this on?" I'm like, okay, never mind. I know not to approach you. You are not one of us. It's a line in the sand in a song.
I've got some good stories about this album, dude. Specifically with track 5, but we'll get there in a minute.
We'll get there.
Okay, so track 2, Heaven Is. It's just shamelessly 80s rock music. Perhaps a couple years late to the party, but it doesn't care. This is arguably the last big album of the Big Hair era to hold on to the big 80s production. After this point, all their contemporaries jumped ship and tried to go grunge, with like the exception of maybe Vince Neil, who brought an album out in '93. But most of them jumped ship and gone grunge, or like heavy.
Even prior to this, some of them had,
yeah, and this album might be Hysteria 2, but I don't care. This is just a great 80s rock song.
They had more fuel in the tank from that.
Yeah. Make Love Like a Man, kind of cheesy, but they admit it was tongue-in-cheek. They were actually first draft lyrics that they just stuck with. But I don't look to 80s hard rock and glam for stuff that wouldn't be considered somewhat cheesy. I don't come to this music for depth. I come to it for a good time.
Yeah, agreed.
But then we get Tonight, which is this epic, sexy ballad. This is one of my favorites. I love how it has a darker edge to it. And when that chorus really goes off, it's just badass. And I think it's testament to how good they are at songwriting that they can make, the ballad a standout,
Yeah, yeah, and that is an important point of a lot of their stuff, which I think they managed to do occasionally from this point on, but they did more earlier, where they would have these really dark sounding songs,
Yeah.
but they were also so melodic that sometimes you didn't even notice that there was a dark tone to the song, because it just it sounds poppy, but there's a lot more weight to it than some other poppy shit you'd be listening to.
I would agree. I agree completely. And now we've got probably the longest note I've ever written.
All right.
But it's a bit of a story time. So here we are. Eddie's story time jingle. Hello. Welcome to Eddie's.
I was trying to do one of those. Never mind.
No, go for it. Go for it.
There were these storybook records that I would listen to when I was a kid, and and it would always begin with like, "You'll know it is time to turn the page when you hear the chimes ring like this." So I was giving you a chime, and we're turning into the first page of the book.
I'm sure I had some tapes like that when I was really, really young. Like you're talking like 3. But yeah, I've got, for this note, this is the best track on this album. It's so fucking epic. On a frosty late October morning back in college in 2015, I was driving my mum to work and myself to the bus stop near my grandparents' house. I only had a provisional license, so I wasn't allowed to drive the rest of the way on my own. But I digress. I'd recently bought myself the deluxe 2-CD edition of Adrenalize. This was before I got a stereo with an aux cord, so I would actually bring the CDs with me instead of solely using my iPod. Anyway, I would have to leave relatively early in the morning, so watching the sunrise as I drove was a common sight. But this morning was something else. In that guitar intro where it's kind of bubbling over and then feeds back until the like really epic bit where the guitar really comes in. At that exact moment, I was driving from like the peak of a hill where it was just fields and trees for miles, and the sun peaked over the horizon in exact time with the song. And it was one of the most badass, hair-raising things I've ever experienced. And it was like something out of Top Gun. And that is why...
If only you had been on a motorcycle.
Yeah, and that is why this is one of, if not my favorite Def Leppard song.
It's a great one.
That is one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me in my life. But yeah,
awesome.
I love that song. So then we get to track 6, Stand Up, Kick Love Into Motion. That is a pure AOR song. I'd expect nothing else from a band like this during this era. It's a great song, nonetheless. It's not my personal favorite, but I can still appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah.
Then you get Personal Property, which I've seen get kind of dogged on, but I kind of like it, actually. It's a bit more of a Sunset Strip edged kind of thing. It's picking up the pace a bit. It's a good time track. I really like this one.
It fits in a little bit more with Let's Get Rocked and Make Love Like a Man for me, where it seems like there wasn't a whole lot of thought put into it.
Yeah.
Especially lyrically, mostly. But yeah, I think that's probably what holds it down.
And then kind of back to the poppy ballad AOR kind of feel, you get Have You Ever Needed Someone So Bad, which, I put lighters in the air, people. This is 80s, balladry done right.
This is like there are those certain songs that you could imagine being younger, for me anyway, and making a mixtape for a girl that you really liked, and you would put this song on there, and it was supposed to be the one that gave them the feels, and they'll be like, "Oh, Steven made me this mixtape, and now I'm feeling things," because
I'm
it does have that sort
to the
of
dance.
Yeah. It never worked out that way for me, but but I made a lot of mixtapes in my day, but Rarely did they have that effect, but this one, just something about just the end, with Joe Elliott's I gotta have you, baby. Like it's really just like, oh yeah. Like if I was a woman, I'd be like, oh yeah, Joe, I'm on board for all of whatever you got. Bring it my way.
But yeah, it's just it's tailored perfectly to its audience, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They knew exactly what they were crafting with this album. Now, here's I've got a pretty funny note on this one. I Want to Touch You. What I would consider to be the album's stripper riff exists in the verses of this song.
Yeah.
All 80s rock records had a pole dancer riff, and on this, here it is. Good song. Reminds me of the summer of 2015, just before I went to college. Just don't touch the strippers. That's the rules. But yeah. I Want to Touch You. Good song. I kind of feel dirty saying that, like, song title. It's like, oh, hey, what's your favorite Def Leppard song? I Want to Touch You. Oh, hey, coming on a little strong there. Like, but then finally you get Tear It Down. Finally, this rocker closes out the record. It's got some, with some drier production, it could have easily been on High and Dry, in my opinion.
It was actually written and recorded for Hysteria.
Was it?
And then re-recorded for Adrenalize. You can on the I think the newer deluxe versions of Hysteria, you can hear the Hysteria version of Tear It Down.
I'm intrigued to hear that now. Yeah. I love hearing like a song that was like initially from one era and then was saved for another one, but then hearing the original version, because it's like, this thing's been around much longer than people think. But
well, yeah. I think that's one of the things, because if you look, it's not just that song. Like so many of the songs on this album still have Steve Clark listed as a songwriter. Yeah. So he was really involved in a lot of the writing, and they kept a lot. I mean, why wouldn't you, keep a lot of his stuff? Because clearly he was a hell of a riff writer. But yeah, Tear It Down's a really great album closer.
Awesome. So that is my number 3, Adrenalize.
Cool. So my number 3 obviously is not going to be the same as yours, because I already covered that album. But it is an album that you already covered. My number 3 is High and Dry from 1981. Hey. So we said a lot about this album already. Like it's to me, it is for a 1 year gap between albums, it is a huge leap in quality, in songwriting quality, performances, even Joe Elliott's vocals. Everything is so improved here.
Yeah.
And we already talked about, like, it's literally great song after great song. Now, I'll agree with you. The first half is way better than the second half. The first half of if you're just talking about a record, side A is absolutely perfect. There is no bad song. It is killer song after killer song for the whole first side. And we talked about those. Let It Go, Another Hit and Run, High and Dry, Bringing on the Heartbreaks, Switch 625. It's like, it's perfect. If the other side had been that perfect, my head would have probably exploded. So, yeah. but it's just one of those albums that takes off running, and if you're into it, you're along for a hell of a ride. And so, I agree with you on a lot of things. You Got Me Running and Lady Strange, kind of weak tracks. Especially, I really do think that You Got Me Running almost sounds like it was a leftover from On Through the Night, and it may have been, because it has more in common to me with the sound of that album than it does for what Def Leppard would become.
Yeah.
but yeah, Mirror Mirror, No No No. I mean, it's one of the, we've talked about this. Like, it's just such a well done album, and honestly, there are things about it that, depending on how I feel, I might consider this my favorite Def Leppard album, but it's only because I really enjoy second albums from bands. I really enjoy an album that still has a little bit of the sort of raw hunger that, and I don't know, that exists on first albums. I say these things a lot about albums like Ride the Lightning, where you hear a little bit of the rawness still left over, but you easily hear the huge step that was taken forward for whatever the band was, and in the case of Def Leppard, they went from sounding like a band that you could compare to other bands going at the time to being a band that sounded like nobody else.
Yeah.
And the fact that they managed to do that while still having this kind of raw edge to some of the tracks, it just makes it that much more of an enjoyable album to me. And really, like, the only thing that keeps it down is the fact that they topped this fucking album 2 times in a row. so that's all I got to say about that one. High and Dry, my number 3.
Cool. Okay, so my number 2. This is where, you know what? I'm gonna, because I've got 2 left. I want to give you a little guessing game.
Okay.
Which of these 2 last albums in my list is my number 2? You've got a choice between Pyromania or Hysteria.
Oh, you're wanting me to guess what your number 2 is?
Yeah.
It's Pyromania.
No.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Because earlier you made that comment of, like, if you're too cool for school, you might say Pyromania is your favorite album.
Yeah.
So it sounds like somebody is too cool for school here.
I took the liberty of looking at some lists online and seeing what would get placed at the top. And generally speaking, Hysteria is usually the top pick. But I did come across a few Pyromanias. But Hysteria, for me, came in at number 2 because I feel like while it is excellent, it's lacking one little thing about Pyromania that really makes Pyromania stand out to me.
Okay.
Personally.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll get to that one soon. So Hysteria starts off with Women. Cool track that introduces us to this brand new shiny Def Leppard, with this much higher emphasis on the production. And, obviously Rick Allen's new drum setup had a huge part in that, and having to rework their sound into being this not only adapted for him, but really taking advantage of what the 80s had to offer in terms of production. And that's showcased really well on the following track, Rocket, which is very experimental sounding considering it's a single. In an era of shred, these guys decided to have this trippy drum solo section showing off their sampling skills and really, really cool, like, reverse vocal parts and stuff. And it's very much a journey of a song, but
that's the one thing that I loved about even the single version that had the music video. Sure, they chopped off little bits to make it a little shorter, but they still included the fucking weird middle part. And as a young person when this came out, I was 10 when I think I first heard something off of this. I was so like, this is rad. I mean, I love the weird samplings that they did of their own vocals and fucked with them and stuff. Like, I thought it was great.
And that finally on this track, that chorus, I'll be out dinner, rocket dinner, dinner, just those really fucking punchy parts. This album was made for stadiums, and you can tell. This is pure stadium rock. And you get to track 3, Animal, 80s rock classic, goes without saying. This somehow takes me back to a time I wasn't even alive for. But it does such a great job of taking you somewhere else.
Yeah. No, I'm with you because I was alive then, and I would say that the 2 songs on here that really do that for me are Animal and Hysteria. They're songs that you hear.
Yeah.
You hear the riffs and the way that just the vibes of the song, it feels like a different time, and you feel it physically. Like, and there's something crazy about that with me. But yeah, Animal is definitely one of those songs.
It almost feels like it was designed to be nostalgic because they're quite, wistful sounding songs. And then you get Love Bites, track 4 ballad, tried and true formula. It works, people.
But great. I mean, love, what a fucking song. I mean, that's and it's one of those things where you learn that it was originally intended to be a country song by Mutt Lange. Like,
wow.
I don't know how much of the songwriting ended up being taken over by Def Leppard, but the story is that Mutt Lange was fiddling around with a song that was intended for country music, and then they adapted it for themselves and made it into Love Bites. And so I don't think lyrically it was the same. I think it was just maybe the melody of the verses and the chorus maybe, but that's an interesting fact about that song.
Which is so weird to think about because it's such a not country sounding song. Like, yeah. I'm really trying to wrap my head around how this could have been anything other than what it is.
Well, just take it down a notch. Like, imagine a lower register vocal and an acoustic guitar, like, when you make love, daily in the mirror. Like, saying like it could easily be. I was playing a fake acoustic guitar over here when nobody at home can see that. But you can hear it in there. But I like I said, I think it was in its infancy. It was intended to be country, and I think very quickly it got turned into a rock ballad. And it is the thing that I love about this song. I'm totally taking over your thing here. I don't know why I've always loved it, but it's such a simple part of the song that you kind of overlook, but it brings a weight to it in the chorus. When there's the singing parts and then there's the guitar that does the like, for some reason that is so good. Like, and that's Phil Collin all the way. I'm just like, that just brings so much more to the song. And that's what I mean when I talk about their songs around this time having a lot to unpack, because that is a thing that you could easily just overlook the first time you listen to the song. Like, there's always little guitar melodies and things that the song is awesome because of all of these things. And if you really think about it, you're like, man, all of these this is one of those albums that it took 4 years to make or whatever. And it really shows. Like, if you're going to take a long time to make a record, it better sound like Hysteria,
For sure. It's just such you can tell it was meticulously worked over and over and over. Like, people slaved over this thing to make it sound the way it does. But god damn, it sounds so good even now. I mean, I know it's such a definitively 80s production, but it sounds fantastic.
But it's one of those things where it's the same thing. Like, I always get annoyed at people writing off albums like this for their sound because it sounds dated, and I'm like, well, nobody watches Citizen Kane and says this movie is dated. No, they're all like, this is a classic piece of cinema, and here's what it looked like at the time. I'm like, that's what Hysteria is. Hysteria is a classic piece of rock and roll history that this is how it sounds, and that's what makes it amazing. Like, it doesn't take away from it at all. Like you can have all your modern production shit. This still exists as the great thing that it was.
And if you're going into an old school kind of album expecting it to sound modern, you need to really think about what you're doing when you're going into listening to something, because, you know, you can't just turn around and say, oh, this has got gated 80s Simmons toms on it. It's, you know, it's therefore inferior to this, which came out 30 years later. And it's like, well, no shit, we've got better sounding, you know, more realistic drum samples 30 years later. 30 years have happened in that time, but
Dude,
I'll
take the drums on this album over most modern shit.
for sure.
Makes me very uncool, but it's the truth.
You know, to be honest, I have nothing against the 80s drum sound, and I'm a drummer, you know. And, you know, so many people say, oh, all the gated reverb takes out the character and the livelihood of the drummer. I'm like, well, if you wanted, you know, you wouldn't ask the drum machine from the Human League to play in the fucking Ohio Players, would you? You know, come on. You know,
drum machine in the Human League.
You know, well, it's true. But, like...
He had a name.
He was called Lindrum. No, but it's just... I have a soft spot for 80s production.
Yeah.
And that's okay. People are allowed to like things. People are allowed to dislike things. But, you know, if you write off an album because of its production, because it's old, I feel like you're approaching it with the wrong mindset right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Because this is a fantastically recorded album for its era, and it holds up now, in my opinion.
I agree.
And am I correct in thinking that they recorded chords one string at a time on certain parts of this album? Like, they really...
I mean, I wouldn't put it past them, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, because there are some really, like, otherworldly sounds on this record, and I've heard things like that about this album.
It would make sense because of the style of the production, and I guess to get certain sounds that would be, yeah. I mean, it would make sense all of a sudden, because when you play a chord, I think even the best guitar player, there's going to be one or two strings that isn't getting the same resonance as the other ones. So if you're doing it one string at a time, that's a pretty interesting idea. I mean, it would take forever,
Yeah.
but it's an interesting idea.
That's why it took 4 years.
Yeah, one string at a time.
One note at a time. Yeah. But yeah, moving on the track list, we've got Pour Some Sugar on Me, which is an undisputed classic.
Stripper song, you know, right? Wouldn't you say?
It is the stripper song. Like, all stripper riffs owe it to this song, you know, especially anything in the late 80s and early 90s, because this here took whatever people did with the stripper riff and made it the whole damn package. This here is, it, you know, it's next to songs like Wild Side and Girls, Girls, Girls and stuff like that for a reason. It's fucking sexy, you know?
Yep.
And here's the point where we get into the album's kind of... It really plays with the album's vibe at this point. You know, Armageddon It. Great riffs, great vibe, great song. It's rockin' and melodic, which is exactly what I come to Def Leppard for. Gods of War, another great song for pretty much the same reason.
I'm going to stop you there for a second. So what we just went through was the entire first side of an album, 6 tracks. All 6 were singles. All 6 had music videos. I think Women was probably the lesser of the hits, but that's the quality of this album. You can release the entire side A as singles and it's successful. Like, that is insane.
I mean, this is a huge album. You're talking like one of the best-selling albums of the 80s, if I'm correct.
Yeah, he's probably up there with like Thriller and albums like that, for which Thriller was another one. Well, I don't think there was an entire side of singles, but there was a shitload of singles off of that. So it's that caliber of popularity. Like, this album literally became the biggest album, I think, in the world for a time, you know?
Yeah, for sure. You know, like I was saying about Armageddon, it's rockin' and melodic, and you know, it's got the hooks, but it's also got that, you know, bite behind it, just enough to be, you know, rock instead of just like straight up pop. But then you get, you know, Gods of War. It's another great song for pretty much the same reason as the previous track. Don't Shoot Shotgun, you know, another great fun song. Great intro, hilariously 80s intro. You know, it's that run for cover.
Yeah.
She's so dangerous. Yeah. It's so good. Run Riot. Seriously, the vibe in this part of the album doesn't let up. You know, it's great times. Great times have been had with this record on.
Yeah, songs like, we could probably name about a dozen songs that are like this from Def Leppard, but Run Riot and Gods of War to me are really great examples of the fact that Def Leppard were so good at writing songs. The pre-chorus of their song is already amazing and you're already satisfied, and then it goes to the chorus, which is another level. Like Def Leppard's pre-choruses were better than most bands' choruses. Like they had so much like in their arsenal of songwriting hooks that you like Run Riot, like the part that sticks out isn't the Run Riot part, it's the get up, break out. It's that part. It's like, if this was the chorus, it would be great. But then you get the chorus after it. It's just like to be crass, it's like 2 orgasms in a row. It's just like you're already wiped out, but then another one comes and you're just like, I was not expecting that, but I'm very pleased about it.
You had one left in the tank. But yeah, I would 100% agree. They have a real talent for making a song climb and keep climbing.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, great. That chorus was great, and then you're like, wait, that was the pre-chorus? I know I'm pretty much echoing what you're saying, but
yeah, we're gonna get true. A little bit later. We're gonna get to a song that I think is the antithesis of that right there, but we'll get there later.
Then you get Hysteria.
Did I use that word correctly? Antithesis. Does that mean example, or is that the opposite?
I think antithesis is the opposite.
God damn it. I thought I was using a really fancy word and I used it wrong. The epitome is what I meant, right?
There
epitome.
We go.
All right. Thank you. Thank you folks for having a glimpse inside my brain where it's so filled with rock and roll knowledge that I forget how words work.
School is for posers, man. Rock is all you need. But yeah, Hysteria, again, like you said, I said the exact same thing about it being, you know, it's that song that takes you back to any given summer you want to go back to. You know, this is the soundtrack to nostalgia, this song especially.
The hook in that song is the fucking guitar part that starts it off. Like that, just the ding, 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 just that. The song could have been 5 minutes of that with no lyrics, and I would have been like, this is a fucking great song. I will listen to this over and over again.
It really is just one of those albums where it's almost like the guitar is also singing. You know, the phrasing. Yeah. The phrasing is amazing.
The phrasing is amazing. I love that.
The phrasing is amazing, man. But yeah, and then you get Excitable, which, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated Def Leppard songs because, yeah, it's almost straight up pop, but, you know, I don't care if it's very poppy. It's a good time. This is the sort of thing that you'd hear in a nightclub scene on an episode of Miami Vice. Like, you listen to this song and you're there in one of those, like, smoky pink nightclubs. You know, it gives me that kind of vibe. And
I feel like it has a lot in common with what we would end up hearing on Adrenalize. I feel like it's more in that direction.
I would agree. And then finally you get Love and Affection, which, you know, this closing ballad is underrated too. And, you know, overall, I love this album. I really love this album. Yeah. But not as much as my top pick.
And what is it? No, I'm just kidding. No, because who knows? But sir, I am going to echo everything that you said, and I'm going to be right along with you because my number 2 is also Hysteria.
Hey.
And we covered a lot here, so I don't really have a lot to say, except for this was the last album that Steve Clark played guitar on.
Yeah.
Before he died, and it's just one of those things where it takes their sound so much further than Pyromania. In the I don't in this not only just the scope, it's almost like you've perfected something. And so now you try to take this thing that you've perfected and you try to blow it out as big as possible to cross over into as many areas of musical taste as you can. Like, we're going to take the Def Leppard sound and we're going to do it in a way where everyone, no matter what you listen to at the time, I'm pretty sure everyone knew something off of this album. And so I think that's what makes it such a huge, important album, because they became like a pop group almost,
Yeah.
while still having a whole lot of fucking riffs. And to somebody that doesn't listen to rock music, this probably sounded like metal at times. So, it's still a heavy album. It's just meticulously produced, and it uses a whole lot of trickery in the studio and technology. And if I remember right, this came out after the album by the Cars that Mutt Lange did, which that album, what the fuck was that album called? Heartbeat City.
Yeah.
And Heartbeat City, I love that album. I love the Cars, but Heartbeat City is the same thing where you start to hear like Mutt Lange is kind of this mad genius that is a perfectionist about using technology in the studio to get the most perfect, almost robotic representation of a particular artist. It's just like meticulously done. And this is like the Def Leppard version of that. And it's got bigger pop hooks. The hooks really like take off on this album. But yeah, you listen to it now and almost sounds like it's a greatest hits album, especially the first half of it. And it's interesting historically to go back and look at what was going on at the time, because the first single off of this album was Women, and it didn't do anything. Like, nobody really cared. It was I mean, to be completely honest, for side 1, it's the worst song on side 1, and it's not the best album opener. It's an awkward album opener for me, just because it doesn't really, I don't know, it doesn't set up the album as well as I think that it should. This is all in hindsight, though, because it is what it is. But now listening to these albums and really trying to pick them apart to figure out where they go in these lists, Women is like a song where I'm like, it's definitely the weakest on that side. And so that makes it even more of a mystery why they would think that needed to be the first single off of the album. But either way, it became a hit anyway, later on down the line. So you have a pretty much perfect side A, just like we were talking about with High and Dry. And then side B, to me, Don't Shoot Shotgun and Excitable are weak points on this side. Especially following Gods of War, which Gods of War may be my favorite song on the album, because it does bring in that thing that we were talking about where it's a darker song. And not only is it a darker song, but it has those levels that it takes you on with the pre-chorus and the chorus, and the guitar melodies are so fucking amazing. And then Don't Shoot Shotgun is just kind of like a fun rocker. And following that song, it's like, oh, but they can do so much better than this song. So that's probably the big thing for me. As much as I think this is an amazing album, when you get to the second half, that's when I think the inconsistencies start to show on the album, and it's not a perfect album, but I think when you talk about the songwriting quality of a lot of the other songs, like I said before, you're talking about, you know, absolutely flawless and amazing songwriting, and then other amazing songwriting that just might be a half step down. So it's like, it's really, you can't make much of an argument, because it's, even the weaker songs, the way that they're put together, they perfected what that song was. And so it's like this album is almost like a work of art. Like it's, painstakingly put together. And let me see, what do I have anything else to say? Let me see. We talked about all of these things. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about it. I do think that even at the time, this was considered a very long album. Which it's over an hour long, which I think at that point it would be considered a double album if you released an album that was that long. So if they had cut out a few tracks, we may be talking about my number one here, but we're not. We're talking about my number two and your number two. So once again, we have a joint, not only number two, but also number one. It's exciting when these things happen, but let's just jump right into it, because I think we'll have a lot to say about this album. And so go ahead.
Sorry, if I may interject just one last thing about Hysteria.
Sure.
If you were saying Women is a weak opening track, which side A song would you swap it with to really open the album with a bit more of a punch?
Oh, if I had to choose from side A, maybe Armageddon It would be number one.
See, I'd just go straight up and just pour some sugar on me right at the front, just for that step inside, walk this way, you and me, babe. Hey, hey.
I guess you're probably right. That would be them cherry pieing this album.
Yeah.
But I mean, if I could pick any song to be number one, I feel like Run Riot would have been a killer, just like a faster track. Because if you look at it, the only fast songs that you can consider quote unquote fast are all on side B. There's no fast songs on side A. So starting it off fast would have been kind of cool. But as it is, we're talking about an album that if we weren't ranking these albums and it was just two of us talking about Hysteria, I would just be like, this album's fucking perfect. It's amazing. Yeah. So it's just nitpicking at this point.
Totally. Cool. So we both know what both our number ones are.
Yep. So hit it.
Okay, so, obviously the third and final album that Rick Allen's left arm would be present for. It's
okay. I was drinking when he said that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just had to say that one. It's a mix of the poppy elements of their future works with the hard edge of their early work. And that's what sets this album apart from the rest of their albums. Because, obviously their first two albums, straight ahead rockers pretty much. Obviously on the first album you got a bit of experimentation, whereas the second album is just boom, rock and roll. This has synth and funny like 80s effects thrown in, but it's not totally abandoned that early metal edge that they still were holding on to. Yeah. There's some very heavy moments on this album. And I'm just going to jump straight into the track by track. My notes aren't very long on this album, which is probably a good thing.
We've been going on for, it's only an hour 14. As our episodes go, this is turning out to be a short one. So we can extend the word album if you really want to.
Jesus. So I come up with this 4-hour word for album. But yeah, I'm rock till you drop. It's very reminiscent of Let It Go, on the first album, but I feel like it's got that added sense of poppiness, which really kind of elevates it to an even higher plain. I've pretty much. It's funny actually. My notes all start with "fuck yeah" for every single song.
Yeah. Plus, like with the chorus of Rock, you finally hear those big fucking backing vocals. It just sounds. And I'll use the word meticulously over and over again with these albums, but it just sounds like otherworldly things going on with these vocals. Like if you told me there was 500 vocals recorded, I'd be like, I hear it. I hear it all in there, and they're all different harmonies. They're all these tiny different harmonies because it sounds huge, and that became a thing that Def Leppard did and do, where they. I don't know how it is that the combination of their voices and obviously production of the vocals, but their backing vocals sound like nobody else. Yeah. It's just this huge chorus of things that I feel like a rock till you drop. If you just sing it one voice, it's all right. It's pretty cool. But you add that big fucking chorus and everyone singing it in the harmonies. It just sounds like an anthem right out of the gate. Like it's just like they started off on a high note.
Definitely. And I feel like that's very prominent throughout pretty much this entire record. Yeah. This is the album where they perfected that huge gang vocal sound. And, there's elements of it on the previous record, but nowhere near as good as here.
Yeah.
Then you get Photograph, which is a classic. As far as I know, is this the only... How many music videos were made for this album? Is it just Photograph?
Nope. Photograph, Too Late for Love, Foolin', Rock of Ages.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Those are 3 videos I haven't seen that I need to watch.
So the videos that I remember, so Foolin', if I remember right, has a whole section where is that the one where Joe Elliott's wielding a giant sword?
I have to see this now.
And then Rock of Ages has like guys in robes with their cloaks with their faces obscured. But mostly it's just performance videos. You know how like the Photograph video, it has a little bit of other elements, but it's mostly just Def Leppard rocking out in a room. They're all kind of that with just different things interspersed. But I think there's a video for Too Late for Love, but I'm not remembering what it looks like, but I think it's just another performance video.
Yeah, and like even in this is probably the poppiest song on here.
Yeah.
But even when the I see your face every time, that bit, when the chugs come in, they're really heavy guitars. Yeah. Jun, 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 really going for it.
Photograph was my introduction to Def Leppard, but also that song, along with I would say probably "Jump" by Van Halen. Yeah. They were the 2 tracks that really made me go, there's this music that I need to start listening to. When I was a little kid, seeing those music videos and being like, this is a sound that I don't hear around the house, but I want to hear a lot more of it. And so I could almost draw a line from Photograph all the way to just me being a fan of all the other bands I get into, because it really like had that guitar sound. And I was like, that's the sound I like, clearly.
Yeah.
So Photograph is an important song for me.
Yeah, and it's an awesome song. It's a great introduction. Mm-hmm. And then you get this fucking speed metal song with Stage Fright. I love Stage Fright. Stage Fright is up there with White Lightning for me. It's one of my top 3, at least, Def Leppard songs.
Also, that's a good example, if I'm thinking of it correctly in my brain, because but they do this thing a lot where they're very good at going from minor to major. In the like a verse will be in a minor key, and then it switches to a major or vice versa. They're very good at doing that in a way where you don't even really know that that's what they're doing. If you become a huge fucking music nerd, then you start picking it out. But Stage Fright, I believe, is one of those where it's a little more of a straight ahead rocker. And then once that fucking chorus kicks in, it's very big and feel good, you know. But
Yeah.
it's amazing songwriting. What can we say?
Definitely. And then you get track 4, Too Late for Love, which is like probably the earliest example I can think of. I suppose you could probably say the same for Bringing on the Heartbreak, but this is how to do a dark sounding ballad.
Yeah.
You know, and for a ballad track, it's very rocking and heavy, you know. When it really comes in with a
Well, that's what makes a really good power ballad to me. Is that the power part has to be there.
Yeah,
you know, and I think eventually because of, you know, the popularity. Well, I guess this is later on down the line, but you had, you know, even I would say even Every Rose Has Its Thorn. That one doesn't really have the power part to it. Sure, it kicks in with drums and guitar and stuff, but it doesn't have. There's no. The best ones always have riffs in them. Like you're always getting that little bit of heaviness along with the ballad.
For sure, and it's even got like the classic 80s whoa kind of gang vocals in there as well, and they were just really showing off by this point. They were like, we've got this kick-ass sound, and we're gonna fucking blow you away with it.
Yep.
And you know, and they just keep throwing these great songs at you. Die Hard the Hunter, you know, that riff is ace. Foolin', you know, absolute tune. Rock of Ages.
So hold on, we can't pass up Foolin'. So Foolin' is the song I was gonna say is the epitome of them taking you to different levels, and you're like already satisfied with the song. Like Foolin' is one of those things that every level the song goes, you're just like, this is amazing. Oh my God, this is even better. Holy fuck. Like it's literally just such a well put together song. And it just gives you the idea that these guys just had ideas just falling out of their pockets. And they just be like, oh, can you pick that up? That's an idea for Foolin'. We're going to throw it in here, you know? And so that's just, Foolin' is one of those things where I could probably talk for a half an hour on that song. Yeah. Because there's so much going on in it, and how great the songwriting is, and the guitar work, and the vocals, and the production. Like it's just, it's probably, you know, one of my favorite. It's up there as one of my favorite Def Leppard tracks for sure. Yeah,
because like that pre-chorus especially keeps on climbing.
And then finally you get the riff, and then boom. Like it's like. You're already satisfied, and then you get this badass riff for the actual chorus. Like, that's just a killer song.
And then Rock of Ages, another song. It's just great song after great song on this album, and this is what made me pick it. Was, you know, I hear songs pop up from Hysteria, and I think that's a great song. I hear songs from this album pop up, and I think, God damn, that's a fucking good song, you know? And then I think, hang on, what other songs are on that album? Are all of those songs in one place? Holy shit, they are. Yeah. And, you know, you got even the album's deep cuts, you know, Coming Under Fire. I'd say probably Action Not Words is like the forgotten song, but I love that one. I love it.
The one that chorus kicks in, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
Man.
And then finally, you've got Billy's Got a Gun, which is so fucking, you know, it's a really heavy song. Yeah. And then just that groove that they're laying down, it's just, I could listen to this album on a loop. It's one of those albums for me.
Yeah, and we just went through this, and my big point for why this is number one was just made. We never talked about a song being not as good as other songs. Like
Yeah.
there is not a bad song on this record. It is legitimately perfect from beginning to end. There's no point where I go, maybe they could have left that one off or done that one better. No, it's nothing but 10 absolute bangers, and it's there is I have no complaints about anything on this album. Even the non-single tracks are amazing songs.
Definitely.
And I don't know if you had more to say, but I was jumping in there.
I just wanted to say, in terms of track listings, there is absolutely no fucking around here.
Yeah.
It is 10 tracks of absolute banger after absolute banger. It's like on Hysteria, even Hysteria admittedly has its peaks and troughs. This is so mind-blowingly consistent that I sometimes have to make sure I realize that this album actually exists, because it's almost like this impossible feat of music writing to have an album this fucking good.
Yeah, it's as they say, all killer, no filler, which is that applies to this album absolutely.
This is definitely one of those albums where I can't think of a low point. Like, I was thinking initially Action Not Words for me was the least memorable, but when I listen to it, I still think this is really good, and the only reason I forget it is because it's this deep in the album and it's not the final song,
Yeah. A lot of those songs I think benefited later on from technology and the fact that you would shuffle your music. So if a song like Coming Under Fire just comes on its own, it's the best thing that you've heard all day. So, but yeah, so I mean, I'll throw my couple of points in here because this is also my number one Def Leppard album. But this is easily the album where they perfected their sound. They could not have done it any better than this. And this is the last album with Pete Willis, because he wrote some of these songs and he played on a lot of the album, and then he was kicked out for substance abuse issues, and then Phil Collin was brought in to finish things up. But I really do think that you have to give a lot of credit to that combo of guitar players, because I think that, as you're seeing here from, my top three all include, Steve Clark, and then obviously Pete Willis on this one. But I just think that I don't know. I feel like that those guys now being missing from Def Leppard is a huge, what would you say? It's a strength that they no longer have. They don't have the songwriting and riff writing of those two guys, and it's very clear that they were very important to what they were putting out there. So on this album, there's no writing by Phil Collin. I think I've said everything in my notes. I think I've said, there is one of the great things about this, and I've said this before, I said it about Hysteria, is, this is an album where there's so much to unpack from all of the songs. Sonically, from a songwriting standpoint, from performances, it's just one of those albums where if you sit back and put your headphones on and you really start paying attention to each individual musician and what they're bringing to the table, there's so much. Everyone is on their A game, and everyone just fucking rules. And it's one of those things where albums like this, and I would even throw High and Dry and Hysteria at this camp. It's an album where like I start using the term song crafting, because it seems like you have people who write songs, and then you have people that like build the perfect song. Like it's songwriting, but it's also this sort of weird, there's a science to it or something. Like it's just like, sure, it's art, but now we've found a way to take this and we have a formula. Formula is a bad term because it doesn't sound formulaic, but it's like some sort of equation where they know how to add everything up to make it this perfect entity, like each little track. And I know that Mutt Lange had a lot to do with that too, working with them, but it's one of those things where this album alone is an album where when somebody lumps Def Leppard in with other bands from the 80s, I think it's absolute ridiculousness. They are a band that stands on their own. Nobody sounds like Def Leppard, and they easily, annihilate pretty much anything else that came out around the time. I mean, we could be talking about metal albums, and there's other great metal albums out there, but something about the perfection of Pyromania just makes it seem like it's transcendent of genre and whatever was going on at the time. It's just like this thing that existed, and it's. I'm going a little bit too. It's just
that's cool.
It's a perfect album. It's just one of those things where it shows that Def Leppard was a band that was in a league of their own, and it's the best. It is the best Def Leppard album. Leppard. All right, I've been talking too long, so I'm going to stop. You have anything else to say?
I mean, what else is there to say? Pyromania. It's unrivaled. It's in a league of its own, in my opinion. Hysteria is the iconic one, but Pyromania is the perfect one.
Yeah, and it's so good of an album to me. Just to give to I don't know, to toot its horn or whatever even more. So if I remember right, 1983 is that the year Number of the Beast came out? Is that 1983? Is that Number of the Beast?
Number of the Beast is 82. So this is the year following.
Okay, so this is Peace of Mind, probably 83.
Yeah, that's the one.
So you're dealing with an album like that, and I think this album is better than Peace of Mind. So it's just giving it that kind of weight that in 1983. With all these other amazing albums coming out, one of which came out from our favorite band of all time. You have Kill 'Em All came out in 1983. I will easily put Pyromania above Kill 'Em All. Like it's
leagues above.
So it's that says a lot coming from me, because there's these albums that I just think are absolutely perfect, but this is the most perfected of all of the albums that came out that year. So before we go on for too long, there you go. Do you have any final thoughts here?
I'd say, it's clear, there really is a line drawn in their discography where, it's 92, between the years of 80 and 92, they released their best work. I suppose you could make the case for Retroactive being a release, but that's a compilation. But
that has good shit on it too, though. I think the original version of Tear It Down is on Retroactive.
I need to listen to Retroactive.
I think.
Yeah, I've heard good things.
It's also got that song that I love that I know we didn't talk about this, but we might as well. We got time. I love, is it called Miss You in a Heartbeat? I love that song, but I like the electric version of that song.
Yeah.
But that is such a fucking good song. I'm glad we talked about it, because we weren't going to get to it because it's not on an album. It's only on Retroactive.
Well, we've got a little moment. This is one of the shorter episodes, so we can give it a little bit of love.
Yeah. I don't even, let me pull it up real quick and look at Retroactive here and see what all is on it, because it's, so Retroactive was in 93, and it was a compilation of like B-sides or non-album tracks or other things. But it's got 2 Steps Behind, which ended up being on the Last Action Hero soundtrack as well.
Yeah. which is a great soundtrack.
Yes, I agree. Okay, no, never mind. I guess Tear It Down is not on Retroactive, but it has a whole lot of great tracks on it, and you could really say that that's the ending of, because this still has tracks that like Steve Clark, was involved in. So you could really say that this is kind of like if you wanted to put a nice little button on the end of the classic Def Leppard era, I think Retroactive is probably the place where you stop. So,
because kind of Slang Onward is our bottom half, and kind of 92 and backward is the top tier stuff. But they're really good at what they do, and they know what they're doing. It's just a shame that Rick had to lose an arm and Steve Clark lost his life.
I kind of wonder what would have happened if. So let's say we live in a world where Pete Willis was never kicked out of the band. Steve Clark survived. Rick Allen keeps his arm. What happens? Like, does hysteria happen? I have a feeling it would have, but the things that came later, it would be really interesting to be able to be in an alternate universe where the 90s come and you get to hear what those initial 5 dudes, what they would have done. Because that would have been so interesting. But I mean, to be fair, like a lot of there was a lot of songwriting from Clark on Adrenalize, and that was very poppy. So maybe they would have, gone down the same route. Maybe they wouldn't have made Slang though, or maybe they would have made Slang earlier. Maybe they would have made a heavier record.
I'm a big fan of like kind of alternate history theories. So like this idea of like you step on a bug and the world completely changes or something like that. Just a single event shaping the rest of the future or something. And, you've got your obvious, like, what if Dimebag was never shot, or what if Cliff never died, and things like that. And when you think about these big events that happened to such influential acts, it would be interesting to peer into a parallel universe where, these tragedies never happened. And, would the music be better or worse? Or, obviously we wish they were still alive, but
yeah, that's the thing is that we're talking about lives here, but there is that part that I believe we talked about this a little bit on our very first episode when we talked about Nirvana. It's like I don't think we would have gotten anything else good. It's like I don't want somebody to die, but sometimes the large story, the big picture of it all, when it comes to a band, sometimes they end up becoming the band that has the influence and reach that they do because of the shitty things that happen. And so it's interesting to think of things that way, because you get bands that are just happy all the time, and eventually they get boring. So it's almost like things have to happen, in your band. Something has to happen, and then I don't know. That's very interesting. That seems like it's a podcast episode all in itself. Us taking our theories of what albums would have sounded like if people would have survived, or we could even do one where people die. Everyone wants to do that joke of having Cliff change bunks with Lars.
It's so mean.
It's very mean. I'm not one of those people. I like Lars, but but it's like if you take somebody else out of the equation, how does that?
Yeah.
Like we could literally do an entire podcast, a separate podcast with hundreds of episodes, all talking about parallel theories of bands, and that would be truly the height of nerdiness right there.
That's an interesting thing. Like, how about this? Like, Slayer sticks to the makeup and actually gets more commercial. Like, and they end up pulling a Celtic Frost, and they do their own like Cold Lake.
Oh God. Or at the very least, they become like a Wasp kind of band.
Yeah, that'd be fucking funny.
Okay. Well, we're totally digressing. So clearly, we're coming down off the high of talking about Pyromania. But if you have any last words, let's get them out before we bid everyone adieu.
Pyromania fucking rules.
Agreed. That's all we have to say. So if for some reason you're listening to this one first, go check out part 1, and we discuss all of their albums from Slang onward. And there's a good amount of us gushing over stuff from those albums too, here and there. Just not to the extent that you heard here.
less consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all we have for this episode of Cranked and Ranked. Thanks for joining us once again. We'll be back soon with another band and some more ranking. And I think it's time to get a little bit heavier. So we'll see where that takes us for the next episode. But yeah, thanks for listening. If you're on YouTube, thanks for watching, and put your comments down below. And as usual, I'm going to let Eddie take us out, sir. Do it.
Later, dude.